Our paper is Pre-Scientific Theories of Cosmic Radiation from Antiquity through the Early Modern Period. All right, so with the benefit of modern science, when we look to the sky, we understand that Van Allen belts notwithstanding, some stellar rays do reach us from outer space. For instance, we see light from the sun, and many of us are aware of its ultraviolet component and take measures to protect our skin accordingly. But certainty about such phenomena, which border on the banal, is the result of scientific investigations carried out in the modern era, which have precised how the sun's rays affect life on Earth. As early as 1901, the presence of some high-energy ionizing radiation in the atmosphere was hypothesized to be coming from an unknown, potentially extraterrestrial origin, but there was yet no proof. It was not until 1912 that stellar radiation was officially discovered, when Victor Franz Hess ascended in a hot air balloon with ionization chambers. At the same time, cosmic energy was theorized to have been electromagnetic, and it was not until the end of the 1920s that Geiger counters were introduced, revolutionizing what had been deemed a marginal, esoteric pursuit with further discoveries of new particles and properties. The rest of the century saw an entire field born to address the properties, qualities, and even uses to which this cosmic radiation could be put. Instruments have been created and continuously refined to measure this radiation, its composite subatomic particles, and their cosmological implications, whether classified as solar energetic particles emitted from our own sun, or what have been designated GCRs, galactic cosmic rays, originating beyond our solar system. Virtually every scientific history of cosmic radiation takes its starting point in the late 19th century, discovery of radioactivity, and justifiably so, when the precise measurable quantities of cosmic rays are the primary subject. However, the concept of cosmic rays originating beyond Earth and mankind's attempts to harness this energy for its own use go back much, much farther. Many of the instruments which were made in the pre-modern era are unrecognizable to our modern sensibilities. Put an antique, magical amulet next to the CERN particle accelerator, for example. Oh, this slide is missing. And nobody would say that the two objects have anything in common. Nevertheless, the idea that celestial qualities could be captured and that they would emit their own secondary radiation in turn was central to many pre-modern systems, right through the late Renaissance and the Enlightenment era. In these later ages, astral influences transformed from expressions of supernatural divine intelligences to natural, measurable, and on some level tangible qualities, laying the groundwork for the present-day scientific investigations. A line could be drawn between pre-modern and ancient theorizing about these quantities and modern astroparticle physics only once reliable instruments were developed, which afforded true insights into not only the existence, but also the physical properties of cosmic rays. The present study, then, is one which takes as its aim the contextualization of these pre-modern ideas, profoundly unscientific though they may be, in order to establish the longer history of man's relationship with the constant onslaught of rays from outside our Earth. When excavating the subject's roots, the astral centricity of the Babylonians and Egyptians have been well remarked. Both located gods and goddesses in diverse heavenly bodies, and from their mythologies can be teased filaments of thought which have remained relevant, at least as a conceptual motif, to the field of astronomy through the present day. Namely, the idea that the star's light rays are messengers, sources of knowledge to be decoded by the initiated few. For one example, the most ancient Egyptians localized Serket, the scorpion-headed goddess, in later ages absorbed into the Isis cult, in the red giant star known more commonly as Antares, the heart of the constellation Scorpio. Within the elaborate Mesopotamian pantheon, the messenger god was Papsukal in the Akkadian tradition, and for the Sumerians, the goddess Ninshubur. Okay. During the Kassite period, these became merged, and the visible presence of this messenger divinity was localized in the swift-moving light of the planet Mercury. Oh, I'm sorry, we're out of sync. Here's an image of Hapsukal. Okay. Here's Mercury, which was localized. Okay. The idea of starlight as a messenger has been a tenacious one. Arthur Compton, when laying out the research program which would ultimately lead to the discovery and controversy over the unequal distribution of cosmic rays latitudinally, really uses language reminiscent of this ancient fascination. On one horizon appear the cosmic rays, bringing messages perhaps from interstellar space. What are they? Whence do they come? What message do they bring? And several decades removed, Brigitte Falkenberg wrote, the physicists consider cosmic rays to be messenger particles that carry information about cosmic sources and propagate this information to the Earth, where it is read out by the physicists. Falkenberg posited the origin of the concept of the sidereal messenger much later in Galileo's work, but we are not very far removed either from the astronomer priests of Egypt and Babylon who interpreted these heavenly messages. The Babylonian and Egyptian traditions also incorporated attempts to draw down and harness in some form energy from the stellar and planetary gods. These typically took the form of small devotional statues. In the former, the Papsukal, named after the messenger deity, was correspondingly believed to function as a go-between to the gods higher in the hierarchy. And in the latter, the invested religious cult statues of Egypt. To get the clearest articulation of the astral principle which informed the Egyptian tradition of animating cult statues, we must advance forward in time to the first centuries of the Common Era, when the Hermetic texts were composed. However, a truly ancient element to these texts has been corroborated by Egyptian astrological and magical papyri. Furthermore, we might dare to extrapolate the method described therein to Mesopotamian civilizations, as evidence of Babylonian influence has been located in the earliest Hermetic astrological treatises' adoption of the god Nibu and a 5-day timekeeping period. The Asclepius text and the Liber Sacer, or the sacred book of the Hermetic corpus, provide instructions to invest cult statues and other objects with some quality drawn down from the stars. This was achieved by natural materials' intrinsic sympathies with a desired stellar or planetary deity. These classifications have been deemed scientifically irrelevant, yet for the great proportional majority of human history, an inherent astral quality to all terrestrial things formed part of their known identity to the pre-moderns and dictated their possible uses when man sought to extend his influence beyond the Earth. This pre-modern philosophy of cosmic radiation, as we might in a sense call it, permeated virtually all of ancient material culture, from prehistoric metallurgy and the early proto-chemistry of artisans to elaborate magical systems. Like the invested cult statues, these mimicked their astral philosophy in miniature, drawing down a stellar or planetary influence, if not through bundles of sympathetic natural materials, then through inscriptions, signs, and numbers believed to similarly possess an affinity with and therefore open a channel through which the heavenly essence could pass to the earthly realm. Whereas the Egyptians and Mesopotamians have primarily left a cosmogonic legacy, cosmogonic has to do with the origins of the cosmos, not the study of the cosmos. The cosmological, which is the study of the cosmos, the cosmological investigations undertaken by Greek philosophy to explain the day-to-day changes visible in the world furnish more distilled theories about the physical interactions of stellar emanations upon the Earth. Ideas about heavenly matter are found in what has otherwise been observed to be a peculiarity or even a defect of pre-Socratic thought, that all phenomena, including thought, was material. Nor were aspects of this thought outright rejected, but rather supplemented. In Robert Multhoff's words, the atoms had to account even for the substance of the gods. Plato ushered in the language which would dominate the following 2 millennia's discussion on the topic. in envisioning a set of original but removed forms of which everything sensible was but an imperfect copy, this existent and changing world was largely posited in the heavenly lights and their divinities. How this was accomplished was imagined to be the result of a divine power's creation of triangular forms through space, which gradually coalesced, following the rules of geometry, to form the solid figures recognizable in as the four elements: air, earth, fire, water. The apex of this triangle resided in unreachable space, and we may recognize in this the first model for a material channel of cosmic influence upon the terrestrial sphere. In the later epinomis, the heavenly ether constitutes the substantial connection to the creator. Though Aristotle's thought subsumed Plato's forms into metaphysics and mathematics, change nevertheless remained the essential characteristic of the sensible world. Celestial influences furnished a continuous stream of qualities which could affect these changes. Within Aristotelian philosophy, they functioned as the agent which wedded form to matter. However, the emerging view of celestial influences hit a snag in Aristotelian philosophy. The position that the sublunar sphere, the Earth, was composed of entirely different elemental qualities, fire, air, water, earth, than the fifth element, ether, or the heavens above. Strictly adhering to Aristotle, nothing of the heavens could be found on Earth and vice versa, nipping in the bud the case for celestial transmission, but this was not to be the case. The Stoics' erosion of the Platonic Aristotelian dualism between nature and the supernatural and the advancement of a single, unified cosmos resolved many problems inherent in the transfer of stellar and planetary qualities to the Earth. Primarily, this was achieved by the new concept of pneuma, a composite of fire and air. Its significance encompassed air, breath, and soul. Pneuma was dynamic, and it could fill empty space and explain astrophysical phenomena as well as cohesion and change in the terrestrial sphere. Posidonius, from circa the turn of the 1st century BC, established a physical chain of being between the first cause and all things by adapting pneuma to the mechanistic astrology of antiquity. The generation of human beings in this context was given special consideration. The human soul's relationship to these heavenly channels assumed an increasingly materialist interpretation by antique philosophers. Plato's chariot vehicle of the soul appears to have begun as a literary image, which became an analogy for Aristotle and the Stoics for the soul's composition of a mix of air and fire. And for later philosophers in the 1st century of the Common Era, it actualized as the luminous body or the astral vehicle. Earlier doctrine held that human souls were created by the far-removed creator in the highest reaches of heaven and descended down to earth. Some philosophers suggested that the stellar and planetary spheres contributed ever-increasing degrees of materiality to the soul, as each realm was imagined to increase its density with its distance from the ineffable one and the proximity to the material earth. The composition of the heavens, which in late antiquity was imagined in increasingly physical and material terms, dictated the path as well of the human soul's descent through the 7 planetary spheres mapped out by Ptolemy's Almagest circa 150 BCE, and the accepted model of the heavens for the next 1500 years, more or less. The stars and planets' positions were frozen at the moment of generation, whether that material generated was plant, animal, or mineral, or even human. The effect of this unique cosmic stamp remains the underlying rationale of perennially popular astrology and horoscopes, even today. The philosophy of Hierocles of Alexandria, who was active around 430 CE, transformed this metaphysical doctrine into one which assigned a material nature to these channels in a physical universe. They became a two-way street, conduits which were not experienced only when the soul descended to the body at birth, but also routes which the sage could travel to re-achieve union with the Godhead. Among the most influential Neoplatonic philosophers of late antiquity, a practice known as theurgy emerged, which revolved around the ritual practice of ascending through these channels to make contact with the divine. Detail, however, of theurgic rituals is still elusive to historians, but a central practice was the manufacture of man-made vessels to channel celestial influences with groupings of natural materials held to possess innate sympathies with them, after the Egyptian and Hermetic model. In theurgy, this process is known as telestike. Its object and rituals were premised on the physical channels by which the fiery material soul could gain access to celestial intelligences or qualities, and vice versa. By the 6th century CE, a doctrine of emanations was entrenched in late antique cosmology and natural philosophy, and thus began a series of many transfers to subsequent ages and cultures of this early model of cosmic radiation. An expanded corpus of magical texts furnished medieval cultures with proposed methods of capturing and manipulating cosmic rays. Franz Cumont famously summed up the position of ancient astrological and magical texts. If astrology was a perverted astronomy, magic was physics gone astray. The medieval treatises on astral image magic continue the tradition of manipulating unseen qualities radiating from beyond the earth, a pursuit that is at the same time as ancient as civilization and as emblematic of the cutting edge of astronomical research. In this errant physics were the germs of radiation theory and astroparticle physics. Though magic was not given any quarter by Aristotle himself, a body of pseudo-Aristotelian works circulated, which rationalized this magic. The Liber de Causis, the Book of Causes, the Secretum Philosophorum, the Philosophical Secret, and others lent Aristotelian authority to many derivative aspects of magical theory, which consequently informed theory and practice through late antiquity and the Middle Ages. The Pseudo-Ptolemaic De Imaginibus is the cornerstone of a body of astral magic texts on the manufacture of an image to attract and retain some celestial quality into a natural or man-made repository. These could take the form of talismans, an Arabic-derived word meaning the influence of the heavenly bodies upon the universe, or inscribed stones and rings. For the latter, Alexandrian and Hermetic lapidaries, like the Chironides, furnished eclectic repositories of stones associations with celestial intelligences, and in the later Arabic Alfonso X Codex, each stone and sigil's correspondence with planetary gods and the stars of the zodiac is predominant. In medieval libraries, De Imaginibus, the same work, often circulated with later works which elaborate on the same theme. Tabit ibn Qurat's work of the same name, the Liber Lunae of Arabic origin, the Seals of Thetel, the Sworn Book of Honorius, the Untitled Treatise on Magical Images by Sahal ibn Bishr, the book on angels, rings, characters, and images of the planets, various versions of the Ars Notoria, including the early 14th century Liber Visionum or Liber Florum Celestis Doctrinae, and others. The quintessential magical text of the age, the Picatrix or the Ghayat al-Hakim, furnishes instructions on the many ways spirit can be coaxed from its natural dwelling place in the stars and brought down by various channels to earth. A seminal text which circulated in tandem with the works on astral image magic we have seen above was De Radiis Stellarum. I'm one slide removed, apologies. Okay, was De Radiis Stellarum, or On Stellar Rays by Al-Kindi. Herein, a novel ray theory was expounded as a logical, mathematically informed development from the emanation theory owing to the Neoplatonist theological necessity of explaining how the one could be continuously present in all things. Although the Aristotelian model is acknowledged, a second model of delivery, a physical ray, was proposed. A straight ray connected the abstract form of the heavenly idea with its material counterpart on Earth, and the operator could manipulate celestial energy as he saw fit. This also solved the dilemma of how celestial powers or emanations could flow downwards. Their composition was uniformly straight lines, which conformed to known geometric phenomena. Nor was this radiation exclusive to the higher spheres. Elemental earthly objects also radiated their qualities outward in straight lines from every point in their multidimensional form, affecting everything in their proximity. When earthly objects absorbed celestial radiation, their own radiation absorbed and re-emitted what it had absorbed of the celestial. Al-Kindi's work sought, along with Al-Farabi, Avicenna, and Al-Razi, to abolish the Aristotelian dichotomy between heaven and earth, directly connecting the first cause, or God, or Allah, right, to the world in which they inhabited. By the time of the Arabic philosophers, the Aristotelian assignation of a dual role to the contrarieties, the qualities of hot, wet, cold, and dry, as both matter and energy, had been reevaluated. Instead, they were reduced to matter, upon which the energies of celestial influences and other emanations acted. Al-Kindi refined the theory of emanations, whose substance he theorized to be a triad of soul, form, and matter. These were classified as well to be intelligences of incorporeal substance. But for Al-Kindi, there was no dividing line between theology and philosophy. The very purpose of the celestial spheres, perceived as rational entities, was as instruments of the transmission of the divine providence originating with their maker in the highest sphere. Yet in his speculations about the physical nature of that delivery, Al-Kindi took the first steps towards what would emerge many centuries later as the study of cosmic radiation. Al-Farabi denied astrology, but organized these emanations into more rigid spheres, and Avicenna assigned to emanating forms an extended involvement in the formation of minerals. These evolutions in thought by Al-Kindi, Avicenna, and others are regarded by historians to reflect the instinct to conform to the nature of the heavens demanded by Muslim thought. For the medieval Latin Christian West, the substance of the heavens was refined to conform to the demands of their own theology. Augustine continued the destruction of the Aristotelian dichotomy between heaven and earth by reasserting the existence of matter. We might regard this as symptomatic of an other earlier time, but the same impulse can be observed in the 20th century. Robert A. Millikan, who lived from 1868 to 1953, used his research into cosmic rays to formulate a hypothesis that transcended pure science. In the eternal, cyclic development of matter and energy in the universe, Millikan expressed a tenacious belief that the Creator is continually on his job. Millikan's model of a physical world mirroring the biological world in evolutionary terms, particularly the birth of atoms and their subsequent building into more complex forms, which he inferred from cosmic rays, has been tied by historians to his pursuit of a model which would satisfy his own particular religious outlook. Millikan's arrangement echoes the as above, so below tenet of the microcosmos and the macrocosmos, which so dominated Hermetic and Neoplatonist philosophy in antiquity and in the Renaissance. The discovery of the secret of creation in the rays of the supernal regions, which the American press enthusiastically lauded upon Millikan in the late 1920s, really recalls the esoteric traditions of the Asclepius texts and other Hermetic writings, recipes of drawing down life from the stars. Although many of Millikan's conclusions were disputed by later scientists, including the exceptional nature of cosmic rays, we're still witnessing vestiges of much older systems of thought coming to bear upon the modern theory of cosmic radiation. With the translation of Aristotle and his Arabic commentators between 1150 and 1250, the great scholastic philosophers were sufficiently equipped to take up ancient cosmology in order to reconcile it with biblical authority. Emanation ideologies from antiquity were defended by Albert the Great, and his treatises, Speculum Astronomiae and De Mineralibus, incorporate Al-Kindi's ray theory, among a range of eclectic sources, into the edifice of scholastic thought, thereby tacitly permitting the functional logic of magical images as receptacles of cosmic rays put in motion by God, the prime mover. In its role in constructing vessels to retain or harness cosmic influences, mankind was viewed as a subcontractor to a work for which God provided in nature the requisite rays and natural material. From Al-Kindi, the West inherited the geometric behavior of rays as a line segment between 2 points which could be in heaven or on the earth. Roger Bacon in the 13th century put forward that from the light's point of origin, right, at the apex of the celestial pyramid, the light radiated constantly outward, multiplying its form and image along these straight lines. Bacon further developed Al-Kindi's mathematically measurable rays in conjunction with the Earth's known geography in its pursuit of establishing a workable model of their various rays and positions. Knowing the relationship between the rays' angles upon the Earth affected the foundation of cities, as well as the construction of exceptional artworks. Many explicitly astrally operated automata populate medieval literature, such as a bronze trumpeter which blew volcanic ash from Vesuvius away from Naples, or the full-scale android credited to Albert the Great. Though accepted as legendary, when the latter was destroyed, Albert's lament that its creation depended upon an astrological alignment which would not occur again for another 30,000 years really testifies to the depth which ideas about the power of cosmic rays penetrated the medieval imagination. Alignment was not the only consideration for the maker of an astral image. Roger Bacon theorized that different materials retain stellar and planetary influences for different amounts of time. Stone, lime, and other dense materials had the potential to retain their efficacy for tens of thousands of human years, whereas metals, woods, and plants were accordingly considered less permanent. The emerging naturalistic and mechanical framework of the scholastic philosophers recast celestial qualities as natural forces rather than gods, demons, or angels. Yet, condemnations by Thomas Aquinas, William of Auvergne, Nicolas Oresme, and Henry of Hesse of astral image making hinged on the inadmissibility of a true relationship between celestial and artificial figures. Their legacy was a reorientation of scholastic attitudes along more strictly orthodox lines, which relegated much of their predecessors' daring theories about cosmic radiation to the sidelines. The use of astral images, inscribed stones, and talismans persisted virtually unbroken from antiquity through the Middle Ages. Beyond the texts of ritual magic, Roger Bacon's renowned elixir to prolong life was based upon the idea of an alchemical activation of latent celestial rays, their presumed nature being a combination of divine light and energy in order to bring about a physical and spiritual metamorphosis. Paracelsus was also a revolutionary figure for the history of medicine for his attempt to reconcile chemistry with Renaissance Neoplatonism. His follower, Peder Sorensen, who went by the Latinized Petrus Severinus, conceived of man's composition in the four elements, but continued to emphasize the importance of a fifth element, ex firmamento, that is, the incoming cosmic rays. However, when the Greek texts of Neoplatonic and Hermetic philosophers were brought to Florence and translated by Marsilio Ficino in the 15th century, another ancient association was rehabilitated as a cultural phenomenon of the Italian Renaissance, the medicinal astral image, and by extension, the capacity of cosmic rays and qualities to effect beneficial changes in the human body. Ficino's 3-volume text on life, and particularly its 3rd book on obtaining life from the heavens, also translated as "on making your life agree with the heavens," defined a new golden age of astral philosophy. The subtitle of the third book on life reveals even more explicitly its source and its scope. In what, according to Plotinus, the power of attracting favor from the heavens consists, namely, that well-adapted physical forms can easily allure the world soul and the soul of the stars and the demons. With this work, Western Europe inherited a veritable guidebook to constructing amulets, talismans, and imagines, which promised to capture, retain, and in turn emit secondhand some quality radiating down from the stars in heaven above. From the 15th century forward, we perceive other truly ancient themes at play once more, such as the correspondences with human body parts to different zodiac constellations first developed by the Babylonians. Ernst Gombrich wrote a seminal essay on the way in which images in the Renaissance were understood to communicate not only the form, but the true essence of a celestial quality. Mary Quinlan McGrath recently explored how these images were proposed by Ficino to retain their heavenly essence. When an image was properly executed and aligned with a celestial ray, whose origin was still believed to be in the divine idea, rather than anything approaching our modern understanding of outer space, the light would find its match in the image and ignite a fusion, which imbued the image with what's called a synergistically greater concentration of the ray, now confined to and radiating from its man-made talisman. From there, celestial influences continue to radiate in geometrically predictable ways, which Quinlan McGrath argues were used by Renaissance artists and architects in the planning of large-scale paintings and buildings. The objective was for them to beam out this celestial-derived radiation to effect real changes within those with whom the work was designed to come into contact. Certain works have been hypothesized to be talismans in their own right, utilizing the laws of perspective in painting and architecture to further the line segments upon which material celestial rays descended to Earth. Cardinal Alessandro Farnese, later Pope Paul III, was a former student of Ficino's, whose astrological vault in the Villa Caparola has been analyzed as an instrument designed to channel these cosmic qualities, as has the Sala dei Pontefici, realized under the Medici Pope Leo X. In their Renaissance medicinal application, beneficial cosmic radiation was absorbed through the senses, viewing, hearing, smelling, ingesting, or even imagining, from natural materials which were believed to innately possess a sympathetic bond with stellar or planetary light rays. These captured rays were considered superior to direct, haphazard absorption of celestial rays, which already in the 15th century was perceived as constant background radiation. The recent discovery of cosmic dust particles on the rooftops of buildings in Paris would have confirmed early modern philosophers' theories about the tangible nature of the heavens' constant influx of qualities upon the earth. Ficino maintained that this secondary radiation cleansed the human spirit by taking in rays directly, such as gazing at celestial light, which Ficino counseled, but the ability of constructed images and objects to retain and transmit specific celestial qualities gave the operator an advantage to pick and choose or otherwise manipulate this energy. Rays entering through the senses, not only the eyes, were believed to alter the organs receiving them, as well as the mind. Modern radiology has confirmed that this is essentially true, but the ways in which radiation interacts with the body is nevertheless a universe removed from Ficino's 15th century astral medicine. Cosmic rays today are recognized as destructive agents. Their heavy ions have the effect, grossly put, of wrecking balls on human cells and DNA. Yet facilities on the cutting edge of radiology with the capacity to synthesize cosmic rays also apply them, albeit dramatically reimagined from their nascent role in pre-modern medicine to the treatment of cancers and other conditions. 16th century philosophers advanced and refined further investigations into the nature of celestial rays as an integrated part of the material cosmos. Pietro Pomponazzi's De Incantionibus of 1504 exorcise the vestigial demons from the unseen edifice of astral correspondences, and underline that any influences transmitted from the heavens were wholly natural phenomena. Bernardino Talesio based his anti-peripatetic system, put forward in De Natura Rerum, on the idea of interaction between the incoming celestial heat upon the terrestrial cold. In the late 17th century, rays became subject to true scientific investigation, such as Sartorius' experiments with an early thermometer, which proved that lunar rays were not cold, as they were traditionally believed to be. When René Descartes addressed the subject of cosmic influences and their effects on the terrestrial Earth, he rejected received doctrine and any principle in physics not supported by mathematics and geometry. Whereas from antiquity well through the Renaissance, Pythagorean philosophy's legacy was a correlation between mathematics and physics, lending to all of natural philosophy the idea that numbers were the material substance of all things, earthly as well as heavenly. However persistent though they were, the mystical aspects of numerical properties of the heavens were cast aside. Descartes abolished emanations as they had been previously conceived, instead proposing a series of whirling vortices on a universal scale in which their motion wears down one another and they break down, their eroded filings coming together in subordinate vortices to form the stars and planets with heavier particles gravitating towards the center. In the grip of this motion, the Earth breaks apart, allowing the fissures to form through which celestial emanations entered. In this way, Cartesian natural philosophy continued the ancient traditional role of the stars in the subterranean generation of stones, minerals, and metallic ores. In the emerging modern era, cosmologies were in decline. Earlier writers had already diverged from the large question to its peripheral topics, as light, electricity, magnetism, and others. A new boundary appeared between natural philosophy as an essay in cosmology and as a physical science. Yet even in the 20th century, when scientific instruments confirmed the tangible nature of cosmic rays, something of the magical remained in the popular imagination. The New York Times ran the following commentary on September 18, 1932. For all the instruments and methods invented to test the cosmic rays, the physicist is still the medicine man from whom he is descended. Electroscopes and ionization chambers and other cosmic ray measuring devices seem strangely like wands and totem poles, and Einsteinian equations, but incantations that make us believe we know more than we really do. What are cosmic rays? There is no positive answer. We simply try to reconcile what instruments indicate with our hopes and beliefs and imagine we understand the cosmos. Nevertheless, astronomy persists as the only scientifically legitimate tool which we continue to approach questions of cosmology and metaphysics. The link which Millikan perceived in the evolution of the universe and the biochemical process in man still appears in scholarly articles, and cosmic rays are recruited as witnesses to the origins of the universe itself. To borrow a phrase from Robert Molthoff, this paper has explored antiquity's, quote, technological sub-basement, from which not only the illustrious ancestors of chemistry emerged, but also we explored the foundations for the field of astroparticle physics. Since this field was in its infancy at the time when the canonical studies of pre-modern experimental science and magic were written, ancient, medieval, and early modern beliefs about the celestial qualities' effect on the Earth so far have resisted a contextualization in the key of a pre-modern or primitive radiation theory. Taken in this context, we see a far longer history of man's interaction with quantities, which dwarfs by comparison the relatively recent history of detection and analysis of these rays in the modern period. I thank you for your attention.